Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Learn by Easily. Today we will start with the living organisms. If we are asked to name a few living objects, then the obvious examples are some animals, some trees, some shrubs, etc. And if we are asked to name a few non-living objects, then the obvious examples are rocks, bricks, a table, a chair, or some other household material. But what if we are asked to define living organisms? Then what came to your mind? There might be some traits related to living organisms like growth, reproduction, metabolism, organization, consciousness. All of these characters collectively define living organisms. However, some of them are capable of individually defined living organisms. Now we will discuss each of these characters one by one. So first trait is growth. It is an irreversible increase in mass of an individual. Growth in case of animals occurs up to a certain stage, while in case of plants, lifelong growth can be seen. And this lifelong growth in case of plants is due to the presence of some meristematic tissues. But growth can't be taken as a sole criteria for defining living organisms because some non-living objects are also known for their growth. For example, sand mounds, mountain boulders, these also grows with time. But the growth process in case of living objects is completely different from that of non-living objects. Growth in case of living objects occurs through intussusception, that is from inside, means addition of materials and cells from inside of the body. However, growth in case of non-living objects occurs through accretion, that is outer deposition of similar kind of materials. So both living organisms as well as non-living objects are known for their growth. So growth can't be taken as a sole criteria for defining living organisms. However, we can consider growth as a criteria with some other criterias. Next state of living is reproduction. It is the production of progeny or new individuals of similar kind. However, reproduction is not essential for survival of an individual, but of course it is very important for the perpetuation of a species. There are two ways of reproduction, asexual and sexual. Asexual reproduction involves various modes like fragmentation, budding, spore formation. Sexual reproduction involves gamete formation and then their unity to form zygote, and then the zygote passes through various developmental stages and finally leads to the formation of a complete organism. But similar to growth, reproduction can't be taken as a sole criteria for defining living organisms because there are some live organisms which are sterile and hence are incapable of reproduction. Example of sterile organisms which are not capable of reproduction includes mules, worker bees, infertile humans. So growth and reproduction can't be taken as the criteria for defining living organisms individually. However, together these can be taken as defining criteria for living organisms. Next is metabolism. Our bodies are made up of various biomolecules and these biomolecules are continuously being made and degraded in our body. These conversions of biomolecules from one form to another are known as metabolic reactions, and the sum total of all these metabolic reactions is known as metabolism. So metabolism basically involves two types of reactions, anabolic reactions or building up reactions and catabolic reactions or breakdown reactions. So anabolic reactions are building up reactions which involves the formation of complex compounds from simpler forms. However, catabolic reactions or breakdown reactions involves the formation of simpler compounds by the breakdown of complex compounds. No non-living object is capable of metabolism, so metabolism can be taken as a defining criteria for living organisms. Next state of living organisms is organization. Organization is the coordination of different components. A living organism has multiple levels of organization, for example cellular level, tissue level, organ level, and each of these levels have some specific properties that are not exhibited by their constituents. For example, a living cell has its own characteristics not found in its organelles. Similarly, a tissue has some traits that are not found in its constituent cells. Next it is consciousness. Consciousness is the awareness to the surrounding and responding to external stimuli. The external stimuli or environmental stimuli could be physical, chemical, or biological. All organisms from prokaryotes to very complex eukaryotes can sense their environment and are capable of responding to the environmental cues. For examples, plant responds to water, temperature, sunlight, pollutants, etc. One example of environmental stimuli is photoperiod. It influences reproduction in seasonal reproducers as well as flowering in case of many angiosperms. But here too comes a difficulty for the patients in coma, because if we consider consciousness as a sole criteria for defining living, then these patients won't come under living category. But we can't say that because their body is still functioning. Although it's functioning on hospital support system, but it is functioning. So it's better to take all these criteria collectively for defining living organisms instead of taking them individually. So in conclusion, we can say that living organisms are self-replicating, evolving and self-regulating interactive systems capable of responding to external stimuli. Next topic is diversity in the living world. Diversity means variety in forms or kinds. And if we add bio word with diversity, then it becomes biodiversity, which means variety in life forms or the number and types of organisms present on Earth. Currently, there are 1.7 to 1.8 million living species on Earth, out of which 1.25 million are animal species and 0.5 million are plant species and rest are others. And out of these 1.25 million animal species, 1.025 million are insect species. Means it is most conspicuous group of animals on Earth. Every year about 15,000 organisms are discovered. It is estimated that 50 to 100 times of living species there are extinct species. So to handle this huge diversity and to have an accurate record of them, we need a proper universal system of nomenclature, identification and classification that can bring out true relationships. And all these activities, nomenclature, identification and classification, comes under systematics. So now we will talk about systematics. Systematic word is derived from Latin word systema, which means system. Systematics and taxonomy terms are used interchangeably, but systematics is a broader field and taxonomy comes under it. Systematics is a branch of biology that deals with cataloging organisms in categories that can be named, compared, and studied. And systematic includes identification, nomenclature, and classification. It also takes into account evolutionary relationships between organisms. But the taxonomy field involves identification, nomenclature, and classification. It doesn't consider evolutionary relationships between organisms. So, taxonomy is a narrower field as compared to systematics, and it comes under systematics. Now we will have a look over history of systematics. Hippocrates, who is known as father of medicine, and Aristotle, who is known as father of zoology, classified animals on the basis of their habitat into aquatic, terrestrial, and aerial animals. Aristotle referred birds, fishes, whales, and insects as major group of organisms. Theophrastus, father of botany, divided plants into four groups: trees, shrubs, undershrubs, and herbs. He described 480 plants in his publication Historia Plantarum. Pliny the Elder introduced first system of artificial classification in his publication Historia Naturalis. John Ray described 18,600 plants in 3 volumes of Historia Generalis Plantarum. He also introduced the term species. Swedish naturalist Carolus Linnaeus for the first time gave scientific naming system or binomial nomenclature or binomial nomenclature. He described 5,900 plant species in his publication Species Plantarum, which was published in 1753, and 4,326 animal species in Systema Nature, published in 1758. And the Systema Nature, which was published in 1758, was the 10th edition of Systema Nature. Right from Aristotle to Linnaeus, limited number of traits were used for classification of organisms, and this system of classification with limited number of traits was considered as artificial system of classification. But with time, as growth in other areas of biology occurred, then more and more characters were considered for classification of organisms, and this system of classification with maximum number of characters is called as natural system of classification. So there are two major eras in the field of taxonomy. One is classical taxonomy and another is modern taxonomy, or more specifically called as new systematics. So first of all, we will talk about classical taxonomy and then we will have a look over new systematics. Classical taxonomy was originated with Plato, followed by Aristotle, Theophrastus, and up to Linnaeus and his contemporaries. Main features of classical taxonomy were: species were delimited on the basis of morphological characters. Only a few characters are employed in classification. It was based on typological species concept, which means that whole species is defined on the basis of a single or few type specimens. This is called as typological species concept, means the whole species is represented by a single type specimen. The center of study is species, means the basic unit of taxonomic studies was species. Species were believed to be static or immutable, means according to classical taxonomy, species won't undergo any changes through time. Now, new systematics or modern taxonomy. The new systematics is a more specific term as compared to modern taxonomy. And this term new systematics was coined by Julian Huxley in 1940. And the main feature of new systematics involves it takes maximum characters into consideration for classification. Experimentation is given more emphasis to find more and more characters for classification of organisms. Species are considered dynamic, that they undergo evolutionary changes with time. All type of variations in the species are studied, so typological species concept was replaced with polytypic species concept, and this polytypic species concept takes into account all the variants in a species, and hence a species is not represented by a single type specimen but by various subspecific categories called as population. Interrelationships are brought about, that is evolutionary studies are done. Now, basics of systematic study. First is collection. In collection, material collection and preservation is done. Next is characterization. In characterization, all the characters of given organism are enlisted. Next is identification. On the basis of enlisted characteristics, identification is carried out to know that whether the given organism is similar to the existing groups or it belongs to a new group. Next is classification. On the basis of resemblance of characters, a particular taxa is assigned to the given organism. And the last is nomenclature. In nomenclature, naming is done for the given organism. Now we will talk about nomenclature or naming system. So there are two types of names: common name or vernacular names, which are from native language of a particular place, and then scientific name. But the vernacular or common names for a specific organisms varies from place to place and from one language to another. So common names can't be used by biologists, otherwise there will be huge confusion. So here are the list of reasons why common names can't be used universally by biologists. First is, many microscopic and unimportant organisms are not given any common name. Some common names are misleading, like love in a mist, hen and chicken, get me not. Some common names have incorrect meaning. For example, silverfish, jellyfish, starfish, cuttlefish. None of them belongs to true fishes, but all of them have the tag fish in their names. Common names can't be used in scientific communication because these varies from one language to another and from one place to another. Sometimes a single organism have multiple names in the same language. For example, water lily has 15 English names and 44 French names. Similarly, prickly poppy has 8 Indian names. So here are some rules of binomial nomenclature. Every scientific name in binomial form has two components. First is generic name and another is specific name. For example, in Mangifera indica, Mangifera is generic name and indica is specific name or species name. Same generic names in different codes should be avoided. For example, banyan tree having ficus generic name and fig shell, a gastropod, is also having ficus as a generic name. This ficus generic name for banyan tree is given by ICBN, that is International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, because it's a plant, and the ficus generic name to fig shell, that is gastropod, that is an animal, is given by ICZN. So these two codes can use same generic name, but this system should be avoided. Generic name is written first with first capital letter, like here. This Mangifera is generic name and it is written before indica, and its first letter, that is M, is in capital form. The specific name is kept in small letters, like here. When typed, the scientific name should be italicized, like here, and when handwritten, it should be underlined. Name of the author can also be added either in full form or abbreviated form. For example, Mangifera indica Linnaeus, it can be written either in abbreviated form or full form. Scientific name should be in Latin or Greek language, and if it is derived from some other language, then it should be Latinized.